Welcome to the Root of Power podcast, where I teach you how to chase your joy, find alignment, and create a life and a business that you love, using actionable methods, interviews, and inspiring stories from people who know that true freedom is found within. I'm your host, your always hype woman and sometimes ass kicker, Amanda Chills, and I am so proud of you for choosing to step into your power. Come along, we've got dreams to build. Okay, my love, I have put everything that I offer for free on one page so that we are not doing more work than we have to, because why would we do that? Hashtag work smarter, not harder. So livemyhappyhealth.com/free. You are going to find everything I've created for not only leveling up in your personal life and building a life that you love, but leveling up in your business life and building a business that you love. Okay? livemyhappyhealth.com/free. Love you. Welcome to the show, everyone. My cat was sneaking in. I'm here with Karin Norden, who you guys may or may not know, but I have followed for a hot minute. And you just do really dope things. And I enjoy it a lot. And I particularly enjoy that you're like very science-backed. And I know that you've got a PhD and you will tell everyone about that. Is the hope and dream. So hello, welcome, hi. Maybe tell us about you and then like a boring fact about you, because that's always fun.
Okay, a boring fact about me is that I was going to say I have a dog, but he's like the best thing ever. So that's not
he's cute.
Necessarily boring. What's a boring fact about me?
Or a weird fact. I'll take either.
So a weird fact about me is that I absorbed my twin in the womb. I really like to tell people that.
That's hilarious.
It's relatively unexpected. And yeah, I'm Karin, technically Dr. Karin, although you don't have to call me that. And yeah, I did my PhD focused on health behavior change, which is really technically the field is health communication, which is the study of the way communication influences individual health behaviors. So that is my expertise. Very much, I like to call it like the real science behind self-help, because a lot of self-help is led by
nonsense
who are it's led by people who have a naturally high level of self-regulation, and they've always been able to do the thing, and they're trying to teach other people their method. Right. And I like to be like, no. If you, my friend, are on the self-help struggle bus, you are a habit try-to-doer, you are a vegetable attempt-to-eater, and you want to come on my magic school bus, like I will be your Miss Frizzle and like guide you through literally the world of behavior change.
So I love that you say that. So I'm a therapist, so like also behavior change. And I'm someone who has a high level of self-efficacy. So it took me a while to not be like, you just do the thing. And then people are like, well, that's great for you, Amanda. I'm like, you don't do the thing. And I'm like, no, but like you do. So I joke all the time that like, sometimes what I say to clients is like so simple that they're like, yeah, bitch, I know. And I'm like, no, but literally it is that simple. Like it's not that easy, but the steps to do a thing are quite simple. And then because I find that humans are, little gremlins, hi Kitty again, we tend to overcomplicate doing anything. We tend to overcomplicate so much. So how did you get to what you're doing now? So I know that you like started a couple years ago and have this like really dope Change Academy where you've got coaches. So can you tell us about that framework? Because that is fascinating to me. Yeah. And I think people don't understand coaching a lot. So I would love if they like understood it through your eyes.
Yes. Okay. So let's start with, since you're a therapist, the difference between coaching and therapy, because a lot of people are really confused about that. Sure. And so what I like to think about it is that the difference between therapy and coaching is very similar to the difference between physical therapy and personal training. Mm-hmm. So as a personal trainer, you're not able to heal or treat any kind of injury. And if you want to have a personal trainer, it helps to have gone to a physical therapist first so that you know what movements are safe for you, you know what hurts and what doesn't hurt. Like that's very focused on healing, right? But then personal training is very future focused. It's like, what do you want out of your muscles, your body, and how can we get you there? And for me, that is behavior change coaching. So in our coaching program, what we do is we have you describe your 2.0 self. We have you describe the version of you that you want to be in 3 or 6 months. And then we have you distill that down to our framework, which is your core 4 values. So the values that person is embodying, and your core 4 habits. So the tiny behaviors that are helping you embody those values.
Mhm.
And so what that does is it takes this big, sort of broad, sort of very vague idea of like being your best self and like
Right.
being your future self. And it gives you something that you can actually focus on a
Like chicken
day-to-day
nuggets that
basis.
you can actually eat
Yes.
versus, because in my experience, and I'm sure that you find this as well, a lot of people can tell you what's wrong and they're like, I don't like this and I don't like this and da 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 da. And like they have no problem doing that. And then I say, okay, well, what do you want? And everyone looks at me like I suddenly grew an egg out of my shoulder. And they're just like, why are there so many eggs on your shoulders? And I'm like, but what do you want? And they're like, deer in headlights does not compute. And I'm like, great, I know what you don't want. Also, you can just say the opposite of those things. But so many people struggle with what they want. And I love that y'all focus on values because listen, if you want to live an intentional life, but you don't know what you give a shit about, hello, that's the problem. Like, it's like trying to build a house, but you like every style of house. And then you're like, I don't know, I just want a house. And it's like, what kind of house? And they're like, I don't know, just a house. And it's like, okay, so like a cardboard box. And they're like, no, a house. And you're like, I need you to pick a style. Like, oh,
Yeah. 100%. And I think a lot of people approach personal development as a way to fix themselves. And so that's where that comes from. It comes from like, you have this societal idea of who you should be. You should be tidy and you should be quote fit and you should be organized and you should have your shit together. Like you have all of these shoulds. And so then you look at your life and you're like, okay, there's a mismatch between what I am and what I should be. I need to fix that gap. And
yeah.
so then it's no wonder we have people who are like, burnt out from self-development and they hate it and they don't want to hear about it and they call it toxic positivity. And it's like, yeah, it is toxic positivity if I'm
Right.
constantly telling you like smile even though you want to fix your life, like that sucks. But as soon as you start to view even the choosing of values as like an exploration rather than like a choice you're locked into indefinitely into the future, that becomes a much more exciting and fun framework to play with. So that's why our clients, we operate in 90-day cycles. So every 90 days, we revisit those core 4 values. And there might be one where you feel like, okay, like I'm really embodying this value and I want to explore a different one. You can have different values in different seasons.
Yeah. I love everything you're saying. And what I find is most people grow up in like shame based motivation. And it takes a while to rewire. Like the shoulds are something that I have no patience for anyway. So I'm like constantly correcting language. I'm like, yeah, there's no should. Like that doesn't help you at all. And if it makes you feel like shit, like why would I want to climb a mountain with a 300-pound weight vest on? Like that makes climbing a lot harder. So maybe we don't do that, but that's what like the shoulds and the shame-based motivation do. And I really don't, I have very, very few clients who come to me who are not like drowning in shame-based motivation and it's all they've ever heard. And then you see this because you're in the coaching industry and like people who aren't in it and don't understand the nuances of marketing tend to also not understand the nuances of marketing, right? Where like a lot of people market via shame-based motivation. And I'm just like, I want to throw up when I see it. Like it's disgusting. And then they're like, and then these people complain about their clients and they're like, oh, these clients have such a wrecked mindset. And it's like, yeah, bitch, you're talking directly to clients like that. Like you're not using empowering language. And I think it's been a beautiful shift. And I don't know if you've seen this, but it's something I've noticed a little bit is like coaches are getting that like speaking with empowering language works much better.
Yeah.
It's like, guys,
I also think, like, to your point, there has been a shift I've seen in like audiences and in
Mm,
consumers where they're like, I'm
yes,
just not going to listen to someone who's going to shame me
right.
into having this. And like, even the way marketing works, I just did like a whole webinar about this, but the way marketing works itself is changing, where I don't think like loss framing and shame based marketing is going to work in 2 years, because right now the marketing that's working is like someone having like a Bloom Greens bottle like subtly in the back of their desk.
Mhm.
Like that's what's working. There's nothing shameful about that. It's literally just product placement. But to go back a second to what you said, like I think I assume there will be like clients listening to this. And one of the things I like to remind people is that um we live in a world that's going to continue to give you shoulds. We live in a world that's going to continue to reinforce that shame. And
Mhm.
so I like to think about it as like standing in a lazy river. If you've ever been in a lazy river, you know, like you can feel the current, but you can always put your feet down and you don't have to move. And even if you pull your feet up and you float for a while and you go along with the current, you can always like put your feet back down again. And so that's what I remind people, is that it's not necessarily about getting rid of that mental monologue that tells you what you should be doing and tells you that you're so shameful. Like we can actually just let that part of our brain sort of like exist in the back of our mind, but we don't have to listen to it and we don't have to take action from that place. And it's the action that's going to circle back and reinforce our the identities that we want to have in the future.
Literally. And part like your business is built on compassionate change, which is the opposite of shame-based change. And if you do this research, which one works better?
Well, we know that compassion based change, we actually know that shame works for very short periods of time. And
Yeah,
so that's why, like, people are like, oh, but when I feel really awful about myself, I do get my shit together. And it's like, yeah.
there's no
And then
cover.
3 days later, you fall off the wagon. And then you come and you're like, why do I always fall off the wagon? Because you just put like rocket fuel in your gas tank and you went through it in like this burst of speed in 10 seconds. And so people always tell me like, but shame works. Yes, yes, it does for a very short period of time. And
Yeah.
then it peters out. And if you want to have sustainable long-term changes, that's where compassion is necessary.
Yes. And this is where like trauma work and compassionate change and like I'm going to say ethical coaching can work so well together because like it's literally running from a bear, right? So like you get your shit together for 2 days because you're running from the bear and the bear is shame, but then the bear goes away and then you're burned out because you've been running from a bear for 2 days and then people are like, "Oh god, I'm exhausted. I must be depressed," is what I hear all the time. "Oh, I just slept for a whole day. I must be depressed." And I'm like, No, you don't like your life," which I don't blame you. You're running from a bear 24/7. And typically nothing is sustainable. And typically they're just not intentional, right? Like you can't be in survival mode and then also do intentional long term things. Like they literally don't coexist at the same time.
Yes,
And
100%.
then they're like changing things that aren't sustainable. And then what I find as well is that people blame themselves because so much shame, so much guilt tripping, so much is just so prevalent in our culture and our family cultures. Like, and then they're like, "Oh, I obviously suck." And it's like, no, your systems suck. But how would you ever learn how to build a good system? Like, I don't know how to build a house. You know why? I've never built a house.
Yeah,
Right?
100%. And I think too, people tend to, I think, shy away from the idea of compassionate change because they have a misunderstanding of what compassion actually is.
Mhm.
And compassion does not mean letting yourself off the hook.
I love
Compassion
that
does
you said
not
that.
mean like releasing everything. And compassion doesn't even mean that you aren't frustrated with yourself sometimes. What compassion means is that you go out of your way to relieve the suffering of others, or in this case, yourself, right? And relieving your own suffering might be to tell yourself, hey, you have to go to the gym today. Even though you don't want to, even though you're tired, you need to go to the gym today because ultimately it will make you feel better. So
Right.
sometimes pushing yourself and holding yourself to a standard and like doing those actions actually is compassionate. And most people will ask me, how do I know if I'm being too self-compassionate? There is no such thing. If you're asking me if you're being too self-compassionate, you are not being compassionate enough.
I think a lot of people confuse compassion with exactly what you said, letting themselves off the hook. But I'm like, that's that's just not having great boundaries or great systems. Like you can be disciplined and compassionate. It's not either or, it's both and, right? And I'm sure that you teach that a lot. And I hear this all the time in like relationships when one partner will try and explain why they did something and the other partner will go, well, that's just an excuse. And I'm like, boy, howdy, do we have a mindset block around explanations versus excuses, which is like there's so many facets into like behavior change and compassion change. What's your favorite piece of it? Like the transformation that you see people get, like your favorite transformation that people get. What makes you light up like one of those like really obnoxious houses who like do the Christmas lights with the songs and shit?
I think it's for me when people get to the phase, like there's sort of the beginning where it's like a struggle. And then there's this like middle part where people have evolved kind of their own identity and their own behaviors, but maybe it falls apart in front of other people, right? And then there's this moment where they sort of cross this like bridge and they're able to be the new version of themselves even in front of others. And they come to me with these stories about how like, you know, they ordered whatever at the restaurant that they wanted, even though that's not normally what they would order, or they wore the outfit that they were scared to wear, or they, you know, went for a run every morning at their grandparents' house, even though grandma is like really, you know, shameful around exercise and things like that. So I get these stories of people who feel like for the first time they are standing in like their own authenticity. And those are like hands down my favorite thing to hear.
I love that. And it's funny that like all the things that you mentioned are so, they're not small, but they're small. And it's like, I think people think, and I was having this conversation with a client yesterday, like people think that this transformation is this like huge, they're huge decisions, but they're not. They're tiny decisions that stack and stack and stack. And there's no right way to do them, right? Like my client yesterday was like, I just want to make sure that I do therapy the right way. And I'm like, well, do you talk about things that are useful to you? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, congratulations, like you're doing it correctly. But it's all these little decisions. Oh, I ordered this food. Or like, I experience this a lot with people who refuse to send food back. Like my dad is one of those people. He's like, I will not send food back. And I'm like, they literally brought you the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, I'm not doing it. And I'm just like, what a strange hill to die on. Like, why? But then if I want to send food back, he's like, hey, her food's wrong. And I'm like, Dad, like, why? And it's all these like little things.
Yeah. And those little things add up. And at least with our clients, we call that evidence of evolution. And every week we require them to like identify like 2 to 3 little pieces of evidence that they are personally involved, like evolving, like tiny decisions that they made differently. Cause that's the stuff that adds up.
Right. And the more evidence you see, the more evidence you're going to see, right? Like,
yeah,
I love that. Do you miss teaching?
No, because I get my fill of teaching inside of our programs. I'm basically always like adjusting something, like creating a new course, updating an old course. So I get that, Phil.
I love that. What's it been like for you having the business grow so much in like a relatively short amount of time? That's a lot of expansion in a fairly short amount of time.
Yeah. So for anyone who's listening who doesn't know, I started my business really in January of 2021. Like before that, I had like 3 or 4 nutrition coaching clients, but I wasn't focused on it. I wasn't posting on Instagram regularly. Like I was not doing it. And so January, I was like, okay, like we're going to do this thing. And that year I made $100,000 in my business. And then the following year we made $500,000 in my business. So, which is just like insane. Like it's not normal.
That is bananas growth. Yeah.
It is bananas. And that involved me like expanding. I had to hire a team. I had to get a bunch of technology. Like you just have to have bigger systems. And so it has absolutely been a whirlwind. And I think growing a business more than anything else in my life has really like pushed me and my self concept, because when you're standing as a leader in front of other people who are expecting you to like have the answers and make the decisions, like this decisions that I make get harder and harder and harder. I had to make a $50,000 decision earlier this year, and I was like, I'm not even 30. Like, I'm not. This is just some sort of test that I like.
I
Shouldn't
need
I
an
have
adult
a
here,
license?
adult, please.
Yeah, I'm like, this is massive amounts of money. This is like people's like careers and lives and stability that's like in my hands. And so I've had to do a ton of mindset and growth work to get to the point where like I'm comfortable and I've like expanded my capacity enough to like hold all of that.
Yeah. What was the maybe the exercise or the thing that you feel like, or maybe the couple things that you feel like made the biggest difference or were the biggest like leverage points for you to be able to do that?
Um, that's a really good question. Number one, I would say is I very quickly realized that the online business industry is one where they kind of buy into this narrative of like, you quit your 9 to 5 to work 24/7. And I was like, "Mm, that's not gonna work for me because like if I am my business's." That's what it was. I read the book Essentialism, and it was like, you are your number one asset. Like
Right.
everything that everyone else needs from you comes from you. And so for me, that was like the permission slip I needed
Mm,
to put myself first in basically every circumstance. Like
yeah.
everyone in my life needs me for some reason, and the person who has to provide that for them is me. And so I have to focus on me. And so
Yeah.
that for me is like when my self-care practices and my routine and all of that stuff became non-negotiable. Like if I
Yeah.
have to make a $50,000 decision, what I do that morning matters, because what I do
Right.
that morning is going to make it's going to be the difference between whether I'm thinking strategically and creatively and intelligently about that decision and if I'm not.
Right.
Um so I think that was one of the biggest things. And then the second thing was really like releasing like my fucks about what other people were going to say.
Isn't
Um
it great when you just like yeet them off a cliff? It's like,
yeah, I was
no.
just like, I can't possibly, because everybody, especially like I show up very authentically. I show up very vulnerably on Instagram. And so people relate to me. And then
Mhm.
when I do or say something that they don't like
Or like
or
triggers
doesn't
them
or
or
triggers them or whatever, then they lash out
mm,
at me, right? Or I will like post a video being like, "Oh yeah, today like I forced myself to exercise even though I was tired." And
mhm.
people will be like, "I don't need this kind of message in my life," and like send me nasty messages. And I'm like,
I'm
"Okay,
telling
like that's fine. I don't." And so I had to learn
it's wild.
to like, well, it really is like people fixate, and then if
It's
I don't give them the attention,
right.
I mean, and that's a parasocial relationship, right? You
I was
watch
just
my
gonna
life every single day. You think we're best friends. You think if you met me in real life, we'd have coffee. And
right.
then I've even had people say to me, like, "Hey, I'm in Washington, D.C. Can we meet up?" And I'm like, no, like, you
But
are a stranger to
who
me.
are
I'm
you? Right.
right. And it sucks. Like, it sucks that parasocial relationships operate like that. But at the same time, I have to be responsible for me and the
Right.
way that my behavior and me doing the best thing for me, I can be compassionate and understand how it might affect you, but that doesn't mean that I'm
But it's
necessarily going to change it.
and that doesn't mean that it's your business, right? Like that has got to be one of the strangest parts of putting yourself out there in that way is
Yeah.
like because people are nosy little gremlins, right? Like one of the reasons I'm a therapist is like I'm incredibly nosy and I get paid to be in other people's business and I'm just like, oh my God, this is my dream. But it is also parasocial where like I will have clients be very curious about my life and like I'm happy to be transparent about many things, but there are many things I'm not transparent about.
Yeah.
And that like that is just such an interesting thing to like see people's triggers and wounds like mirrored back And I like to say all the time, like, you can die mad, but I'm going to die happy. And like the things that upset you, if they're my problem, then they're my problem and they're my responsibility to fix, sure, 100%. But like many things are not
Yeah.
that people get mad about. It's like, honey, this is where you just have some work to do. Like, you're
Yes.
welcome. You're
But
welcome. Go do that work.
and I'm very curious about like what your perspective is on this as a therapist, but I think it's very interesting that there's an expectation that like I'm not going to trigger anybody at any point with my behavior. But it's like, I went through
How
a
is that
lot.
possible?
Well, and I went through a lot of mental health issues, like an eating disorder being one of them. And I worked with therapists, and it was actually never about you should avoid your triggers. There's a very short period of time when you're in like deep therapy where maybe you want to avoid your triggers.
Sure.
But after that, you have to learn to navigate your triggers. And
Right.
so I find it absolutely preposterous that I, as like just a random human on the internet, am expected to identify everybody's triggers
A
ahead of
car
time and avoid them.
neurobehavior change expert.
Right.
So I agree. I think it's preposterous that like you are expected, first of all, to do anything.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to do a damn. None of us have to do a damn thing except die someday. That's probably the only thing we can get out of until some old rich white man figures out how to do that. In which case, like totally not going with that because that sounds fucked up. But that's insane. Like even as a therapist, like I know my clients so deeply, obviously because I'm like digging around in their brain for like long periods of time. And even I don't know all of their landmines. Like
Right.
it's completely unreasonable. And like that's a mirror of their own wounds. So like not for nothing, like they're welcome that you showed them a place where like they have a wound. And so, okay, go heal that wound and please be happy. But I agree. Like I think a lot of people, and I don't know what it's like coming from, but I think social media has created this narrative, this belief that like people are supposed to be like the people who show up on social media, creators on social media. Yes, we want them to be not assholes on purpose. Like that's
Yeah.
just, we're obviously not speaking about those type of people, but like we can be conscious and we can be considerate and we can be thoughtful, but it is literally impossible to know everyone's triggers and wounds and landmines without saying nothing.
Yeah.
But then you help no one. So it's like, yeah, when we step on a landmine, like it's not our responsibility unless you're saying like you didn't go to the gym, you piece of shit, which like again, shame-based change. But yeah, no, that's bananas. Like can't let them die mad because you're gonna die happy and you have like bigger things to do and more people to help. And it's like,
Yeah. So
yeah,
I mean, that has definitely been, especially in the last year, the biggest piece of growth for me is that I have to be willing to express who I am in my opinion and not really worry
and
as
people
much
can take it
about.
or not, right? But like no one does that with Nike, or maybe people do it with Nike. Those poor customer service reps are probably like, "I hate the color of the shoe. You should die." And it's like, oh.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think personal. Like, I'm a huge fan of radical responsibility, where I'm like, everything is your problem. Obviously, not someone experiencing abuse or assault
Right.
is not their fault, but there's a really, really fine line between like that's not your fault, and if you keep allowing it, you kind of deserve the grave that you dig. Like,
Yeah.
not that people deserve abuse or
Right.
assault, but if they allow it and continue to allow it and say, yeah, I know it's not okay. I know it's not okay, but I'm staying, but I'm allowing it. It's like, okay, but you take responsibility for that because that is something you're choosing to allow, even although it is obviously not something people deserve. But like triggers and wounds are the same way. Like you trigger something in me, maybe I'm mad at you, but why?
Well, and I think when it comes to radical responsibility, like what we kind of tell our clients is that radical responsibility is really about figuring out the why. So we have a lot of clients who are dealing with, like, I'll give an example. One issue is that we work with a lot of radical responsibility around is like I can't get my workout done. So like I want to work out on a regular basis and I can't get it
Yeah.
done. And they will tell me something along the lines of like, well, my kid was sick. Okay. And so then I say, okay, so did you choose to go be with your sick child instead of doing the workout? And they're like, well, no, I had to. And it's like, well, no,
You
you
don't have to.
chose that. And let's take ownership of that, because you
Right.
probably chose that because it matches your values of being a great parent.
Right.
And maybe we can even release ourselves of the shame around not doing the workout if we realize that in that moment we made a choice that was aligned with
Right.
our values. So for me, behavior change is where radical responsibility belongs. And when it comes to
Literally.
like you mentioned, right? Like abusive scenarios, for me, any behavior that is in an abusive scenario is not actually true behavior because it's coercion. And behavior operates
100%.
completely differently when it's coerced behavior. So I always give that sort of like general rule disclaimer when I'm talking about behavior change. I'm like, yeah, this stuff doesn't apply in coercive
Right.
situations.
And even then, like it is a choice, right? But I'm not saying it's like an enlightened choice where 6 months from now they're loving it. But like if the choice is I'm going to get my ass beat or I'm going to go along with whatever decision is being made, like,
Yeah.
well, it makes a lot more sense to go along with whatever decision is being made here. So, like,
Yep.
part of that radical responsibility, and there's so many like tenets to behavior change, and like sometimes it's so similar to the therapy because therapy in and of itself, like, really is behavior change as well in a different lens, but in the same way, is like those are still choices, but they were the right choices to make at the time. You stay home with your kids, your schedule, you don't know how to work your schedule in order to align with what you want. Like so much of it is just a skills deficit.
Mhm.
And really, I think what I'm saying is like it breaks my heart to see people take it so personally and say, like, I'm a failure, I suck, I can't figure it out. And it's like, okay, but has anyone literally ever shown you the tools? Or if they did, were you in a space to receive them and apply them? Because
Yes.
those are two different things as well. Is like there is an inherent amount of safety required in order to change your life for the better.
Yeah.
Because if your life is a shitstorm and everything's on fire, oh, and it's you're getting hit with like wildebeest because it suddenly started raining wildebeest, like I don't think that you're then building a morning routine
Right.
because there's
Yeah.
wildebeest raining from the sky.
And I think the skill development piece is huge, because what I hear from a majority of our clients is, I just need to figure it out. That's the sentence they say. I just need to get it together. I just need more discipline. I just need to figure it out.
Yeah.
And if you are attempting a high level skill, like if you're on a ski slope and you're about to go down a black diamond, at no point are you ever like, I'm just going to
I'll
be
just do
disciplined.
it.
I'm just going to be disciplined about this skiing. I'm just going to figure it out. I'm just going to work on it by myself. No, you go to the baby hill and you get the ski instructor and you learn how to freaking do it so that you don't injure
Die on a black
yourself when
diamond.
you fall, right?
Right.
And it's not quite as big of stakes for us in behavior change. But I still think if you want to learn to do something and you want to learn to do it well, number one, you can't expect yourself to just figure it out. And
Right.
number two, having someone to guide and model you on how to enact and build that skill that you
Right.
want that's going to change your life, that's the best investment you can make.
Period. Like, get a Maui to your Moana. Okay. Get a Maui. That's what I say all the time. I'm like, congrats, I'm your Maui. You're welcome. And then when I make them cry in a field, I'm like, okay, well, you're welcome. Like, this is fine. This is what it takes. What's been like the funnest? What's something that you're like interested in right now? What's something that's fun for you?
One of my current like projects is style, or like fashion.
Yes,
I've been
totally.
posting about this a lot because I had this sort of internalized idea my entire life that I didn't understand fashion and I wasn't girly. And I was talking about this on Instagram the other day. I had this sense of incompetence around those things, around femininity
Yeah.
and fashion and dressing and style. And so what I did to deal with that, to cope with that, is I just said I didn't care. So I'd be like, I don't care how I look. I'm just a jeans and a t-shirt type girl. But for years, I wore these very, very sort of basic outfits. I didn't do makeup. My hair was in a bun on the top of my head every single day. And recently, I started to think about how that's affecting me. And I started to actually dress myself every day and like put on makeup and do my hair. And the way my self-confidence has completely, like, I'm a pretty confident person, but it's a whole new level. And the way I'm able to like manage my mind and manage my life when
Yeah.
I'm dressed in the morning has made a huge difference. So that's like my personal development project right now.
I love that. What like pieces are you interested in right now?
So I bought a year and a half ago, I bought a leopard print skirt. Okay.
Yes.
And it sat in my closet for a year and a half because I was like, I would look at it every day and be like, this is like
What do
too
I do with this?
for me. Like, what do I do? And so finally, like a month ago, I was like, no, I'm wearing this freaking skirt. It also didn't help that like I have gained weight in the past 2 years, so it doesn't zip all the way. So I could no longer wear it with anything that would like
Like
tuck
tuck in or something.
because it just doesn't zip.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, whatever. I can still wear this. It still fits. I just don't. Also, I think it's unrealistic, like the waist size. I'm like, what is this? This is not a Disney character.
This is for children. Get out.
Um, and so I was like, okay, I'm gonna wear. And so I like looked on Pinterest and I typed in leopard print skirt and I like bought this sweater to go with
Thank
it. And I
God for
finally last week like wore this like white sweater with this leopard print skirt and
And now
like
your whole
had my
life
hair
has
done.
changed.
And I'm like, yes, I am leopard print skirt Karin now. Like, here we go.
Karin 2.0 wears leopard print skirt.
Yes. So that has been my latest project.
I don't know about you, but I have like alter egos for clothing where like, so I live on a farm.
Mhm.
I work from home. Like I literally see clients in my field. We were sitting in the barn yesterday with the minis. We have 3 minis. Lucy, who is a terrorist. Her life dream is to create chaos and she takes it very seriously. And then we've got Peanut, who's a little rascal, and Cleo, who's just a sweet baby angel. And she's like, I don't know about these 2 hooligans, but whatever. So Peanut was like nibbling my pants the whole time. And I'm just like, Peanut, what you doing? And he's like, I'm making your pants dirty. Like, this is what we're doing today. So like, I'm not wearing expensive clothes. I'm not wearing super, super nice clothes because I'm outside all day. And so I have alter ego. So if I have like a leather jacket, I'm like, oh, like bad bitch Amanda loves her leather jacket. Anytime I wear a linen, I'm like, oh, Tuscany Amanda, who obviously lives on a vineyard in Tuscany and like makes pasta from scratch and is good at it, obviously wears like a ton of linen and flowy dresses. And I don't know if that's something that you do.
I don't, not as much, but that may be in the future for me. Because I feel like I'm just starting to get into like dressing.
Like flowy skirt Karin is its own alter ego.
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like she goes to farmers markets.
That's probably true. We do have a farmer's market like down the street.
It's like a farmer market vibe.
I'm about to become like city girl Karin because I live in DC and right now I drive to the like Maryland WeWork in order to work.
There's no one in DC?
No, there is one in DC, but the Maryland one has free parking. So
oh, nice.
For me, it's like, okay, but the espresso machine is broken at the Maryland WeWork. And I can't have that. And it's been broken for like a month and a half. And I'm like, is WeWork going broke? Like, are they even going to fix this?
Right.
So I think I'm going to start to like, I'm going to enter my city girl era and I'm going to start to take the metro to the downtown WeWork and go there and see how that goes.
That sounds fun.
Yeah. So that'll be fun.
City girl era. Yes, please. I'm curious about how, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, because I don't know how much he likes being shared to your partner, how it's been for y'all to navigate you having a business that makes that kind of income and like growing into that role. Not that you have to answer this question, so feel free to say like, no, thank you. But like how your partnership has navigated that.
So, okay. So John and I met when I was in graduate school, and I very much remember we went on our first date and he paid, and I like feminist Karin was like, oh, we can split it. Like I got it. And I remember him saying to me, no. And he was like, no, he's like, it's not a gender thing. He's like, I have a full-time job and you're a grad student. This man knows that I'm getting paid.
He's like, you're literally just poor.
Like, you're a grad student. And he said, he was like, someday you're going to make the big bucks and then you can buy dinner.
Oh, smart man.
Okay. So I was like, okay. So my entire relationship, he paid for everything and I just let it happen because I'm like, someday I'm going to make the big bucks.
Yeah,
So
that's
I think he's always been very comfortable with like
Mhm.
me making a lot of money. I will say though, he's also very career oriented and has
Mhm.
done very well in his career. And so for as much as my business has grown, obviously business growth doesn't always distill down to
Right.
Karin's personal salary grows. And so every time my salary does grow, he happens to get a promotion. So it's this running joke in our house that like I'm I'm still trying to be the one who's buying dinner, but every single time, like I make more than he gets a promotion, and he always is like making more than me, and I'm like, oh.
Oh, no. How terrible.
So there hasn't been much to navigate there. It's a great problem to have. I think the bigger thing to navigate for us was just like what it looked like for us to both be home because he works from home some days, I work from home some days we're
Yeah.
both here. And so just like learning to have the appropriate amount of like closeness and space has been
Yeah.
that's but what the past like couple years have been for us.
How's it been for you separating like work and home life? Or are you someone who's like I'm pretty integrated with work and home. Like it doesn't I can kind of hop between easily and there's no like loss of energy there.
Mhm.
Like it doesn't bother me to work kind of whatever hours or like shift doing like working from home doesn't bother me and having kind of a non-set schedule doesn't bother me. How's it been for you doing that?
Um, I definitely have to be stricter about boundaries and specifically social media because when I'm on social media, like that can very easily take over my life. And then I'm scrolling and then it's like I don't get to scroll like a normal person at the end of the day because someone's in my DMs and they don't have
Right.
access to this and blah 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 blah. And so I have to have very strict like work periods. And I have started on Thursdays today. I'm home. So this is like our home office. But the rest of the days I have made a concerted effort to go to WeWork, which is why I started going there in the first place, or like go to a coffee shop, because for me it's a lot better for my mental health when I have that separation and I can actually close work down, not be on my phone and like be totally offline.
Oh, I love that for you. I'm sure that's something you work with a lot of your clients as well, is like, again, people understanding how to create a system and then implementing a system are definitely like two different skill
Yeah.
sets. But
Yes. So we have a whole course called Compassionate Calendar, and the
how's that
course is
going? Because that's fairly new, right?
yeah, it's fairly new. So we launched it in August, and we open and close it. Like it's only open twice a year, so it's not like consistently selling. But we had an incredible launch. We sold almost 500 copies of the course in 2 days. And so it'll reopen I think in February of next year.
Mhm.
And I think that'll be fun because the reviews are the core of the course are just like incredible, and it really does teach you how to build a system. We teach time blocking, but you don't have to use time blocking if that doesn't work for you or whatnot. Um, but we teach like these 6 steps of having like leading an intentional life, basically.
I mean, it's nice to understand how to teach and design curriculum, right?
Mhm,
You're like, oh, this is so great. We
mhm.
love this for you. What's something that you've been like excited to share about, but people like don't ask you about a lot? So you like nerd out over, but like people just don't tend to ask.
Honestly, people ask me a lot of questions, so I like am kind of blanking on something on things like the things I get asked about. Everybody wants to know everything about how my life operates and exactly what I do and blah 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 blah. Um,
Do you find that that's like an external validation problem where they're like, oh, if I could just run my life like Karin, then I would be successful. And it's like, but that's totally unhelpful because your lives are so different, like probably completely different things. So it's like, I can't run my life like a cat. I'm a human.
yeah, I actually think the problem is that a lot of people lack self-trust. They
Mm.
lack the self-trust in order to be able to choose decisions for themselves. And
Yeah.
so while it's always a good idea to learn from an expert before you make a decision or learn from an expert in order to explore your options, I think when people are engaging with social media, one problem that I see is they outsource all of their personal decisions to the social media creators they follow. So instead of deciding what their morning routine might look like that would be most helpful for them, they watch the routines of two different influencers and then they pick one and they follow that person's routine. So I think the dependence on social media is really related to fundamentally a deficit in the skill of making my own decisions, figuring out what's right for me, and trusting my own decisions. And that's a skill that we can learn. It's a skill that we help people with in our program. And when they are able to make their own decisions, then all of a sudden life transforms like very quickly for them.
Literally, because they're not going to make like I have clients sometimes. One, I don't allow my clients to say I don't know because I'm like, you do know. We just don't have a practice of like being stubborn enough to get to the answer, which really just involves me going, okay, but what would you like? And then they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, sure you do. And then they tell me and I'm like, okay, great. We love this for you. And then sometimes they'll be like, well, what do you think I should do? And I'm like, no, thank you. I'm not the person who lives with the consequences here. So I will not be the person making the decisions. And then we like wrap all the way back around to radical responsibility. And it's like, I teach people all the time, like when you make a choice, you also choose the consequences. So let's be intentional about our consequences as well. And people always know what they want to do. Always. I've never, and I have done this for so long, and we're making like big, should I leave a relationship? Should I stay? Should I change a job? Should I blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, people always know what they want to do. They just typically say, I don't know. And then they stop there. And I'm like, but you do know.
Yeah.
So
and it's interesting because people I work with, especially who are very evidence-based, are very resistant to following their instincts because they think that instincts are this woo-woo thing. And what science actually tells us is that instincts are not, in fact, woo-woo at all. So there's one study that I've read, I'm going to try to find it, where like they'll look at case studies where a nurse is in a room with a patient and the nurse all of a sudden is like, this patient's about to code. And they are able to save the patient because something in their instinct told them that that patient was about to code.
A lifetime of
what
evidence.
Instincts are is it's your brain analyzing the world around you and retrieving information that you know about at a subconscious level. So your brain is actually using your past, it's using evidence, it's directing you towards something, and we have to learn to take our instincts seriously because a lot of times they're actually pushing us in the right direction.
Well, and I think always, depending on which part is online, right? So like, you know, and like, let's just take survival mode for an example, right? Like I have a lot of clients who have a sexual assault history, and very often that comes with, oh, I should have done more. I should have fought back. I should have XYZ. And I'm like, okay, but then you would be dead. Like you would be dead. That's what would have happened, especially more likely if you're a female, you would be dead, but also likely if you're a man or non-binary, you would be dead. So I'm like, no. Like your mind, because it has one job and it's to keep your meat suit running, is going to give you the right thing to do in any moment. Where that becomes unhelpful, and where I love that you take like a compassionate change approach, that you take an evidence-based approach, because a lot of people don't, and they fuck people up, is when people no longer need survival skills, but they're operating out of that old programming. And it's like, okay, but that's not working for you. It worked at some point because otherwise that programming would not be here.
Yeah.
But it's no longer necessary to outsource decision making to decide that you're helpless or hopeless or not take responsibility. Like that came from somewhere, but it will not help you any longer. And it's so much easier to make a change when you're not dogging yourself 24/7 and when you're just being factual about like, okay, these are skills that I can learn.
Yeah.
And so I can learn them. And if I can learn them, then I can apply them. Great. Like it really is so simple when people like break it down, and then we tend to overcomplicate things and we're like, but what about the stars squaring Jupiter? And it's like, okay, but like you can still reset your kitchen. Like it doesn't matter if Mercury's in Gatorade. You can still reset your kitchen. It's okay.
Just FYI, I do have to go in like 3 minutes.
Oh, yes. Yeah, do your thing. Well, no. What? Okay, fine. Beautiful. Not fine, like not fine. Fine, like yes, that's beautiful. In that case, where can people find you?
Mhm.
And if people get amnesia and forget everything that we talked about, what would you like them to remember?
Yes. Okay. So if you get amnesia and you forget everything that we talked about, I would say one of the nuggets here for me is that your brain is directing you towards your choices for good reason. And even if you're frustrated with those choices or looking back, you would make a different choice. Like in that moment, your brain is always on your side, right? That's part of why my business is called Body Brain Alliance. So that is where you can find us. Great segue is bodybrainalliance.com. You can find me directly at Karin Nordine, PhD. And the best place to start with us is our Change Academy membership. And that's where we actually teach change tools every single month inside of Change Academy. We have programming that helps you learn those things depending on I'm not sure when you're going to drop this episode. So it
You can
may
ask for
be,
whenever you'd like.
okay, great. We're going to be closed. Change Academy enrollment will be closed between October 19th and December 11th. And so we're updating it. We're launching Change Academy 2.0. So if
Fun.
it airs in that period of time, just join the wait list because that is going to be the best place for you to
Love
start.
that. Dude, thank you so much. You are such a doll. I hope you have the most beautiful day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.